Welcome to the training video, Entering Data in Nash Analytics. This basic training is designed for everyone who enters data in the Nash Analytics tool. It will show you how to sign into the tool and enter observation data for a unit. It will also provide some useful tips for using Nash Analytics. Unit leaders use Nash Analytics to run reports on staffing compliance, unit activity, staffing ratios, care quality, and financial data, all based on the data you enter into Nash Analytics, so the accuracy and timeliness of the data is very important. You will find that the data entry process is very quick, usually less than 1 minute per unit observation. The first step is to sign in to Nash Analytics. Depending on your hospital's setup, you would use either a desktop shortcut or a bookmark to open Nash Analytics in Internet Explorer. On the login screen, enter your username and password, typically your Windows login ID and password. Then, click the Sign In button. Once you have signed in, open the observation window for your unit. To do this, expand the navigation tree until you reach the appropriate unit. Open the Fiscal Year folder and then open the Hospital folder. You can see all the units in the hospital. Select the unit for which you want to enter data. You'll see several icons for the various functions in Nash Analytics. Look for the Data Entry section and the Data Entry icon. Note that if you cannot see the icon, you do not have the appropriate permissions to enter data on the selected unit. If you believe this is incorrect, please contact your system administrator. Click the Data Entry icon. The Data Entry Observation Record window appears. You will use this window to collect the staff and activity data used by Nash Analytics. You can verify that you are in the correct window by looking on the left side to see the chosen fiscal year and unit name. Note that a pop-up alert window may appear saying you must reset the census. This alert can appear for 3 possible reasons. 1. If this is the first time you have entered data on your unit. 2. If no data was entered in the prior observation. Or 3. If your unit had closed and is now reopening. The alert is appearing now because this is the first time entering data for this unit. For now, click OK to close the alert. Before you enter any data, let's quickly review the main section of the Nash Analytics interface. This section shows the date and time for the current observation. These buttons are used for copying, deleting, or saving observation data, navigating between records, or exiting the current record. This area shows the selected fiscal year and unit, which you already verified. The ADT section is used for entering admissions, discharges, and transfers data. The activity section is used for setting the census. The staffing sections are where you'll enter observation data for productive, premium, and non-productive or orientation staff. You can enter monitoring variables for both census and staff here. Finally, near the bottom of the interface is the optional comments field. Note that when you hover your mouse over any of the labels, additional information about the section is displayed. We'll cover each of these sections in this training. Before entering data, make sure the correct time and date are selected. Nash Analytics automatically shows the current observation date and time when you first open the tool. Nash Analytics allows you to take daily snapshots of the unit's activity, usually every 3 to 5 hours. For example, in this unit there are 6 data entry times per day. The goal is for timely data entry. We strongly recommend that data be collected as close to the selected observation times as possible. Think of data entry like administering medication at given time intervals. Your goal should be to enter data within the 30 minutes prior and the 30 minutes after the observation time. If you miss an observation, you can enter data for an earlier observation by clicking the previous button to display the appropriate observation. With the observation time and date selected or verified, now you can begin entering data. In the ADT section, you will enter the number of admissions, discharges, transfers, and expirations that occurred since the last data entry. In the admission field, enter the number of patients who were admitted since the previous data entry observation time. This refers to patients who actually arrived onto the unit. For this observation, assume you admitted 4 new patients, so enter 4. In the Trans-In field, enter the number of patients who were transferred into the unit since the previous data entry observation time. As with admissions, this refers to patients who actually arrived onto the unit. For this observation, assume 1 patient transferred in, so enter 1. In the Discharge field, enter the number of patients who have been discharged since the previous data entry observation time. This refers to patients who actually have left the unit and will not be returning. For this observation, assume you discharged 3 patients, so enter 3. In the Trans-Out field, enter the number of patients who were transferred out to another unit since the previous data entry observation time. This refers to patients who actually have left the unit and will not be returning. For this observation, assume 1 patient transferred out, so enter 1. In the Expiration field, enter the number of expirations, if any, since the previous data entry observation. For this observation, assume no patients expired, so enter 0. The Activity section includes the census and gain or loss fields. The census will automatically display once any activity has been entered. The census displays the current patient population after your new ADT entries are taken into account. Note that if no patient activity occurred since the last data entry observation, you must delete and re-enter a 0 in at least 1 ADT field. This is because a value must be entered into at least 1 ADT field to enable the census formula. Verify that the census is correct. Any discrepancy between the census value and the current patient population warrants correction of either the ADT data or the census number itself. Remember that pop-up alerting us to reset the census? It is necessary to reset or manually override the census the first time data is entered or whenever there is a missed observation. If a previous observation exists, go back and correct the ADT entries if there are errors, or manually override the census in the current observation. If this is your unit's first observation and the ADT data is correct, then you must manually override the census so that there is a starting point from which to calculate future censuses. In this example, your actual patient population at the time of this observation is 20, including the current ADT entries. The census doesn't match the patient population because this is the first observation for the unit, so you must manually override the census and enter 20. No data is manually entered into the gain or loss field. Once the ADT data is entered, Nash Analytics will automatically calculate the net gain or loss of patients since the previous data entry. A loss, that is, a decrease in the census, will appear in parentheses. The staffing sections are where you'll enter observation data about the individuals currently working on the unit. This includes productive, premium, and non-productive or orientation staff. In the Productive Staff section, enter the current number of staff working on the unit at the observation time. For this example, assume you have 4 licensed nurses, 3 patient care technicians or assistants, and 1 clerical associate. Enter those values into the appropriate fields. You could use the Other field for productive staff who don't fit into the categories provided here. Make sure not to include orientation staff, one-to-one caregivers, or other non-productive staff members. In the Premium Staff section, enter the current number of productive staff who, at the observation time, were earning premium differentials because of overtime or came from a staffing agency. For this example, assume one of your productive licensed nurses is working an overtime shift and another is from an agency. Enter 1 in the Licensed OT field and 1 in the Agency Licensed field. You already counted these individuals in the Productive Staff section. These entries simply ensure the system adds the appropriate differential earnings to their base rate. In the non-productive orientation staff section, enter any staff currently on the unit in orientation or considered non-productive, such as anyone sitting with a patient. Staff counted in this section should not be counted in the productive staff section. A sitter might be a patient companion or nurse's aide. For this example, assume 2 nurse's aides are sitting with patients, so you should enter 2 into the sitter field. You also have 1 licensed RN and 1 nurse aide on orientation, so you enter 1 into the appropriate fields. The Monitoring Variables section allows a unit to track variables that might increase the workload of the nurses, such as unique clinical requirements or unusual staffing situations. There are 2 types of monitoring variables, census and staff. Census variables pertain to your patient's census, and staff variables pertain to your staff. These variables are unique to each unit and are chosen by the unit leader. In the Census Variables column, enter the number of patients who fit into any of the categories listed. For this example, assume 1 of your patients had to be restrained due to agitation, 2 were in isolation, and 10 on telemetry monitoring, so you would enter these counts into the appropriate fields. Note that these entries could be based either on counts taken at the time of the current observation or since the last data entry. In the Staffing Variables column, enter the number of licensed nursing staff who were completing the activities listed in the staff variables. For this example, assume 1 of your nurses was at an education or in service, so you would enter 1 here. If 1 nurse had gone off unit with a restrained patient since the last entry, you would enter 1 here. At the bottom of the screen is the Comments field. This is an optional free text area in which you can add comments that might be helpful in understanding the unit operation at this particular observation time. To save your data, you must click either Next or Exit. Click Next if you need to enter another data observation, or Exit if you're done entering data. Let's review the other buttons in the interface. You would use the Previous button to display the previous observation record. The Delete Observation button will delete the current observation record. The Copy Previous Observation button will copy the previous observation data into this record. We do not recommend using Copy Previous Observation, as we would like you to take a thoughtful moment to evaluate the current staffing and activity on the unit. Often, this data varies from observation to observation. Note, clicking Previous, Delete Observation, or Copy Previous Observation prior to selecting Next or Exit will not save your data. So if you don't want to lose your work, be sure to click the Next button first. You can then click the Previous button if you want to see the observation data you just entered. The Recalc button recalculates all ADT data to obtain the census from the current time selection forward. Previous corrections made to the census will no longer be valid. The census will be based on ADT data entered. We recommend that you do not use the Recalc button. We're done entering data, so we'll click Exit to close the window. That's the end of the training. Let's recap what you've learned. The data entry process involves these basic steps. Sign into Nash Analytics. Open the observation record window for your unit. Verify or select the date and time for the current observation record. Enter ADT data. Reset the census if necessary. Enter staffing data. Enter data for the monitoring variables. Enter comments if desired. And finally, save the observation. That's all there is to it. Now you should be able to enter observation data for your unit quickly and easily. If you have any questions or need help using Nash Analytics, speak with your unit leader or contact the Nash Group. Thank you for participating in this training.